Discover the incredible power of silence, 5 transformative secrets to inspire your inner strength. Emily moved through the crowded halls of St. Peter's Hospital, a blur among bright scrubs and harsh fluorescent lights. She was the quiet one, the nurse everyone knew yet very few truly saw. Each day, she tended to patients with an open heart, her mind often drowned in the monumental weight of care that the chaotic environment demanded. Machines beeped incessantly, echoing like urgent whispers that dived into her thoughts, leaving no room for her own voice. While she comforted others, anxiety nestled deep within her soul, an insistent reminder that her talent and passion could wither in the shadows of neglect. As the sun dipped below the horizon one late afternoon, Emily slumped against the wall, her exhaustion surging like waves against a rocky shore. New policies rustled through the hospital like poison ivy, spreading an undercurrent of dread. Resources were being stripped away, her patients, the venerated souls she fought for, were slowly being abandoned. Torn between her humility, a lesson woven into her very essence by her family's regard for hard work, and her instincts that bellowed for her to rise, Emily felt paralyzed. Should it all matter more than keeping her head down and accepting her fate? Emily, a voice called out. Dr. Hayes emerged from the bustling crowd, his authoritative presence carving a path toward her. His sharp gaze narrowed, accessing the embers of potential in her. You have something to say. Don't let silence be your default. The words landed like a weighty stone, igniting a flicker of determination deep in her. But lurking behind that ignited ambition was a tangled web of fear, woven tight with threads of past warnings. Don't rock the boat. Before Emily could respond, thoughts spiraled around her like a tornado. Did anyone in that hospital truly see her struggle, her commitment? She felt like a ghost, an afterthought among the relentless sea of hurried doctors and overwhelmed staff. Where was her voice in all this noise? As she tended to her patients, the vocation she loved morphed into shackles binding her to silent compliance in a world screaming for change. Doubt loomed over her like storm clouds about to unleash a tempest. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Weeks blended into one another, and the overwhelming disparity within the hospital birthed her hidden notebook, a sanctuary where her observations began spilling onto the paper. Each entry was a whisper against the backdrop of her resolute silence. Broken systems, lost causes. She documented every injustice but felt her resolve shaken by her family's lessons. Ambition meant trouble. Could she betray their teachings? Could she risk tarnishing their good name? As the looming decision over the new policy approached, Emily's emotions churned violently. What was the price of speaking out? Midnight conversations oscillated between rebellion and fear, with the scales teetering dangerously on uncertainty. The thought of using her voice felt like standing upon a precipice, staring down at the abyss below, and understanding that the leap could shatter her family's legacy or forge a new path. The day of the meeting arrived. Torn between silence and a new sense of purpose, dread twisted like vines around her breaking spirit. Could she step into the light, shatter the shackles of muteness, and dare to disrupt the status quo? As she stood among powerful figures, her heart raced with a potent blend of hopelessness and raw determination. With palpable tension thickening the air, she inhaled deeply, preparing to venture into words that felt like a reflection of an entire community's plea, a truth aching to be spoken. I have something to say. Emily's voice trembled but carried conviction as it filled the conference room. I have something to say, she began, the words spilling out like a rush of fresh air in a stale environment. Every figure present paused, their attention shifting from the mundane bureaucracy to the quiet nurse who had lingered in the margins for too long. The shock on their faces provoked a jolt of courage within her. She wasn't simply a bystander anymore today, she was challenging a broken system. With each sentence, the chaos of her thoughts began to dissipate. She spoke of the dwindling resources, the patients who desperately needed care, and how the new policies would only exacerbate their suffering. Alongside urgency, a steadfast resolve surged through her as she articulated her frustrations. Yes, it felt dangerous, a venture into the unknown, but the light in her chest was blazing brighter, igniting an inner strength she hadn't fully recognized before. "Emily, let us not forget our fiscal responsibilities," Mr. Thompson, the hospital administrator, interjected, his tone dismissive. The skepticism in his voice reverberated within her, attempting to shred the fragile confidence she had woven. However, beneath the weight of his words, she'd uncovered a deeper truth about herself, the unwillingness to shrink back in the face of adversity. "I understand, but the least we can do is to find a compromise that protects our patients." A newfound clarity resonated in her answer. Emily navigated the complex landscape of confrontation and diplomacy, recalling the tenets of communication she'd learned during nursing school. Each point became more eloquent than the last, as she wove her passion for medicine into persuasive arguments that demanded attention. As her colleagues shifted uneasily, a strange sort of kinship enveloped the room. Perhaps they were all feeling the tension brewing, caught in the delicate balance of ambition and obligation. Emily realized she wasn't alone in her apprehension. It wasn't just a battle of her own but a confrontation that called for collective re-evaluation of priorities. The meeting, once purely administrative, became a catalyst for introspection. She spotted Dr. Hayes at the far end of the table, nodding in cautious approval. Perhaps the silence she had carried for so long had been misinterpreted as meekness. In truth, it had been a crucible, forging her spirit amidst uncertainty, a silence that, when broken, revealed fortitude. But as the meeting wrapped up, the whispered promises of change felt fragile. Had she really made an impact, or had she merely stirred the pot, risking backlash? The shadows of doubt crept back in as she walked out. Picturing her family's expectations and the cautionary tales they had shared, could ambition truly coexist with the humility they had instilled in her? As Emily stepped into the bustling corridor of the hospital, the weight of what she had just done settled heavily upon her chest. It was a moment of exhilaration and trepidation, intermingled like oil and water, refusing to blend neatly. She had addressed the elephant in the room, but what lay ahead was uncharted territory filled with potential backlash, confrontation, and the testing of her own values. In the quiet aftermath, she wondered if she had only begun to scratch the surface of her true potential. Would her voice, once a dormant ember, fuel a blazing fire, or would it risk burning bridges she couldn't afford to lose? The tension left her breathless as she confronted the reality of her newfound resolve and the weighty decisions that lay ahead. What would it take to find her footing in this new role? The stakes were high, the risks palpable. Amid the chaos, she gripped her notebook tighter than ever before, thinking perhaps her next entries wouldn't just document injustices, but map the path for the change she longed to see. Emily pressed her back against the cool, sterile wall of the corridor, fighting to slow her racing heart. The adrenaline that surged through her from the meeting still clung to her like sweat on her skin. Each breath was a reminder of her defiance, but with each exhale came the creeping doubt: had she gone too far? The conference room had been a tremor, and now she lived in the uncertain echo. Moving away from the bustle toward a quieter, secluded area, she sought solace in the small break room, a refuge littered with mismatched chairs and the lingering scent of unwashed coffee mugs. As she poured herself a cup, her reflection in the tarnished metal pot caught her attention. She barely recognized the woman staring back, a woman who had spoken up, who dared to challenge authority. Yet, that woman felt unanchored. How did she reconcile the professional Emily with the one who raised her voice? A crack of light filtered through the small window, illuminating the dust motes that danced in the air. That light seemed to beckon her, a symbol of hope, or perhaps the beginning of something larger. She grabbed her notebook and flipped through her previous entries. Scribbled thoughts from the past now took on new contours. Each line seemed more intricate, a tapestry of her evolving perspective. Her initial frustrations about hospital policies had transformed into a palpable craving for action. She realized she had to do more than just document, she needed to strategize. How could she enact tangible changes that weren't just theoretical but effective? Exactly what she needed was not only boldness but also a plan to match that inner fire. The thought nudged her to contact Dr. Hayes. He had shown a hint of support, and perhaps he could become an ally for her initiative. As she stood there, her heart thumping with new purpose, she composed a quick email, articulating her reflections and summoning enough courage to express her desire for collaboration. Would he see her as a partner, someone to champion her cause, or merely a disruptor? In that moment, her confidence wavered once more, but she pressed send before she could second-guess herself. Once back on the hospital floor, the cacophony of busy nurses and distant conversations resonated in her ears. Intensity seemed to fuel her determination as she navigated through the ward, showcasing a newfound composure. It wasn't just the echoes of her own voice she heard, it was the collective sigh of strained patience from patients yearning for attention. Could she take on the mantle of a leader, a voice for them as well? Doubts still lingered, like shadows in the corners of her thoughts, but clarity began to flourish. By the day's end, she found herself recounting her journey to a colleague in the lounge, impulsively sharing her ambitions out loud. "I want to create a committee," she declared, less as a question and more as a reality she had just conjured. "To address resource allocation, advocate for changes, we need a platform to communicate our concerns." Her colleagues' raised eyebrows encouraged her to continue, and as she spoke, she discovered another truth: the act of verbalizing her aspirations solidified them. To plan, to engage, to fight this path would require an assertiveness she hadn't tapped into before. However, there was also a nagging thought: would the inevitable pushback from the administration dim her resolve? The looming confrontation felt like an almost tangible weight resting on her shoulders. Her thoughts swirled as she exited the lounge, propelled by a powerful mix of anticipation and fear. This newfound mission came tied with risks she couldn't ignore, the threat of professional condemnation hovering like a storm cloud. Still, each step felt deliberate. She was moving forward. But what would it cost her to challenge the status quo? Would the very system she was trying to improve be her undoing? The questions gnawed at her, demanding answers in a world where ambiguity reigned. A flicker of resolve returned within her. She reminded herself that silence, once comfortable, had become unacceptable. Yet in amplifying her voice, would her actions echo in support or scandal? Only time could reveal answers, and Emily was determined to confront whatever lay ahead, even if it meant standing alone. The realization that true change was a double-edged sword invigorated her. She was ready for the plunge. The next step loomed larger in her mind, a defining moment. It was clear the time had come to face not only the administration's resistance but also the invisible barriers within herself. What awaited her was daunting, yet the path had begun to unfold with a promise of transformation. Emily walked the hospital corridors with renewed energy, the ambient noise a reminder of her surroundings but also a catalyst for introspection. Each step echoed with purpose, as if she were marching toward an inevitable confrontation. Her mind churned with ideas, strategies, and the potential outcomes of her initiative, a committee to advocate for the needs of patients and staff alike. It felt ambitious, even reckless, yet exhilaratingly necessary. Her commute to the break room, a routine usually filled with idle chatter, became a battleground for her thoughts. What if she could reshape the very culture of her workplace? Emily envisioned a series of meetings where nurses and physicians could voice concerns, engage in dialogue, and influence decisions. It was a pipe dream formed from fragments of frustration, but the more she contemplated the ramifications, the more clarity washed over her. Leadership was constructed not solely from courage but from a shared vision. The idea slipped through the cracks of her conscious mind, surfacing vividly as she settled into her favorite rickety chair. With pen in hand, she began drafting an outline for her proposal. It was a plunge into the unknown. The thought of presenting it to her colleagues and, later, to the administration filled her with a cocktail of hope and dread. Would they support her, or would they dismiss her as an inexperienced novice chasing shadows? Her pulse quickened. The lingering shadows of doubt crept back in. What if Dr. Hayes, who had seemed intrigued by her earlier outburst, expressed concern or redirected her perspective? Had her impulses been naive? The questions saturated her mind, muddying her ambitions. To confront these doubts, she decided to sharpen her focus, breaking her plan into actionable steps. Emily decided to brainstorm in more detail. What were the specific changes she envisioned? Every push for transformation needed both a vision and a solid rationale. As she scribbled her thoughts, another realization dawned: she wouldn't merely be an advocate, she could also harness her own experiences from a patient care perspective. Having navigated through endless bureaucratic red tape, she understood both sides of the equation. With each line, she was outlining not just a plan, but a mission that resonated deeply with her personal encounters. Her past frustrations had morphed into her arsenal. The potential to create a structure that allowed other voices to be amplified filled her with renewed purpose. The fear of being shot down began to transform into a determination to be heard. Perhaps she could balance her plan focusing on collaboration rather than confrontation, engaging her fellow staff in the vision without alienating her superiors. The process of writing just one more page ignited her critical thinking. To measure success, she needed metrics. What did advocacy really look like in the hospital? And who would join her cause? She found herself drafting a list of potential collaborators. Names flowed forth, each representing someone who might be willing to challenge the status quo alongside her. After hours of concentrated effort, she leaned back in her chair, exhilarated yet fatigued. It had suddenly become clear, not only the quality of care but also the quality of the work environment were at stake. She was ready to step into the fray, but the question still loomed: would she be met with open arms or resistance? Determination flickered in her chest, igniting a fire against the backdrop of apprehension. She resolved to present her proposal by the end of the week. It was a bold move, but the potential impact propelled her forward. The thought of such vulnerability sent a chill down her spine, yet the anticipation of making a difference transformed the chill into a shiver of excitement. As she gathered her materials and prepared to leave, Emily's resolve thickened. Watching her colleagues drift through the corridors, she felt their silent struggles resonate with her own aspirations. They needed to voice her voice. She could no longer remain just an observer. Stepping into the crisp air outside, she inhaled deeply, feeling a weight shift. The storm of self-doubt was beginning to ease, replaced by an insistent pulse of action. A deep-rooted conviction that she was ready to face whatever was to come surged within her. This was merely the beginning. All she needed was the courage to step up and speak out. With the horizon wide and unknown, the urgency thickened in the air around her. Amidst that rush of determination, she couldn't shake a lingering question: who would challenge her the most, her colleagues or the administration? What obstacles loomed ahead? The next challenge was already gathering its forces, and she had to get ready to confront it. The sun peeked through the hospital's tall windows as Emily arrived for her shift, the light a stark contrast to the uncertainty still chilling her thoughts. Today was the day. She felt the weight of her decision tighten her shoulders as she navigated the bustling corridors. Each step toward her office felt monumental, amplifying the inner voices questioning her readiness and the potential backlash she might face. She settled into her desk, the clutter of old charts and sticky notes providing an unwelcome distraction. Focus, she reminded herself. She needed to paint the vision clearly if she were to inspire others. As she opened her notebook, her heart raced. The outline was becoming a compass guiding her through this labyrinth of professional growth. But in the silence of her mind, a new thought chased away the initial excitement: was she truly prepared for the confrontation her proposal would ignite? The clock ticked steadily toward the afternoon meeting. A knot twisted deep in her stomach, and for a moment, she considered retracting entirely. What if she reframed her plans as a casual suggestion, one devoid of bold proclamations? But as this idea surfaced, it felt inadequate. Mediocrity would only amplify the risk of her colleagues feeling unheard. In that moment, a truth flashed in her mind: genuine advocacy required exposing herself to vulnerability, a reality that couldn't be sugarcoated. Spurred on by a newly ignited fire, she dug deeper into her thoughts about allies and collaborators. Each name on her list represented a different perspective, a set of experiences that could elevate the conversation. What if she made these individuals a part of her journey? It could transform her proposal into something larger, a collective voice rather than just hers alone. She gathered her resolve, hoping her collaborative spirit would shine through when she confronted her peers. Next came the reality of potential pushback. Dr. Hayes loomed large in her mind, his skeptical gaze an intimidating specter. He owned a profound influence over the department, and while he revered established practices, he was also known for valuing data-driven decisions. She needed to prepare for the unexpected. Rather than simply anticipating his resistance, she contemplated how to leverage his expertise. Perhaps it was time to turn the apprehension into a strategic advantage. As she pondered, memories of other moments rushed back, discussions with patients where empathy had moved mountains. Emily understood now. To connect, she had to listen deeply and articulate her thoughts with clarity and confidence. Through her connections with those who had received care, she crafted a narrative that both illustrated need and echoed hope. Those personal stories, intertwined with facts and metrics, would be her pillars of strength. With the meeting time closing in, she rehearsed her delivery silently, fleshing out the proposal with intention. Each note was not merely an observation but a call to action, a way to worry less about admin approval and more about the staff's shared realities. Emily visualized standing before her colleagues, empowered to advocate, to present data, and to weave in narratives that symbolize them. She wasn't just constructing a plan, she was resurrecting voices that had long been muted. But doubt rooted in her the same doubts that had crept in during the writing process. Were her expectations too grand? Would her colleagues truly resonate with her or cast her aside as an idealist? She took a deep breath, resisting the urge to reroute her ambition into something smaller, more palatable. The time had come. Emily squared her shoulders and stepped out of her office, feeling exposed yet alive with purpose. The breath she took was both surrender and resolve. Would she be able to unite them in common cause? The enormity of the task ahead consumed her, but the notion of standing alone, voicing silent frustrations, filled her with anguish. She arrived at the meeting room, heart thundering in her chest, surrounded by familiar faces, each carrying a burden that echoed her own. Pushing open the door, she recognized the stakes. This endeavor could either illuminate their struggles or risk isolating her. A collective silence fell over the room as she prepared to speak. Could she inspire them, or would they remind her of every doubt she had about her professional capabilities? The moment of truth loomed heavy in the air. And then, as she stood at that precipice, a question flickered within her, disrupting the silence of her thoughts: could she truly transform the culture of their hospital? She took a deep breath, ready to face whatever answers awaited her. As the silence enveloped the room, Emily's mind raced, grappling with the weight of expectations. In that fleeting moment, she reconsidered her approach, questioning whether to launch her proposal with the fervor she had imagined or to ease into it, softening her entrance like a whisper. But the earnestness of the mission tugged at her. This wasn't just about her, it was about the transformation she sought for the entire hospital. With every eye fixed on her, Emily felt a sudden rush of clarity. She recalled the faces of patients she had cared for, their vulnerability stark against the sterile white. The stories she had crafted with those moments in mind surged to the front of her thoughts. They were not just anecdotes, they were powerful narratives that demanded to be told. Suddenly, she understood that she had to channel that same urgency into her own voice. It was now or never. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice steadier than she felt. "I want to share a vision that stems from our shared experiences and the patients who rely on us. This isn't about new policies for the sake of change, this is about enhancing our approach to care in ways that truly resonate with those we serve." She paused, gauging the room. Dr. Hayes's expression was inscrutable, yet she could feel the tension radiating from him. Taking a moment to breathe, she pressed on, "I've spent time reflecting on the challenges we face, as well as the incredible potential we have for innovation. I believe our patients deserve more than what we've provided in the past." Every word she spoke felt like a ripple in the surface of still water, her determination igniting a desire for engagement. Emily didn't merely list facts and figures, she recounted stories that particularly marked her, stories that underscored the need for a shift in culture. With each anecdote embraced, she fueled not only her own courage but sparked a flicker of interest from those listening. Yet, dark shadows lingered in her mind. What if the stories fell flat? What if Dr. Hayes regarded her with the same skepticism she had feared? She was well aware of the bureaucracy that stifled innovative ideas, and she grappled with the possibility of resistance, even ridicule. Still, she pushed forward, bolstered by the possibility of connection. "I've outlined a framework," she continued, gesturing to her notes, "designed to give us avenues for open dialogue about our practices. Let us create a culture where every voice is heard and valued, one that empowers us to take risks and rethink our methodologies. Change starts from within." As she spoke, a trail of uncertainty began to clear from her mind. Despite the apprehension weaving through the air, Emily could see the cogs of thought shifting in some of her colleagues. A few nods here and there offered her reassurance. Dr. Hayes, however, took a breath as if gathering clouds before a storm. Emily, while your enthusiasm is commendable, you must understand that change is accompanied by risk that needs to be evaluated with hard data. What you propose sounds rather idealistic, don't you think? The words landed heavily, leaving a moment of silence in their wake. Emily recognized the moment as a watershed, both a challenge and an opportunity to forge her path forward. Taking a breath that strengthened her resolve, she addressed the challenge head-on. I acknowledge that risk exists, but isn't it true that stagnation carries its own risks? Our patients are suffering. We owe it to them to explore new avenues of care. I don't believe being idealistic negates strategic planning, it can enhance it. A spark flickered in the room, a delicate balance teetering between skepticism and curiosity as others began to lean in, drawn by her passion. Yet Emily wasn't done. She sensed another layer of complexity lurking beneath the surface. While she had stirred a response, the fragility of their trust still hung in the air, ready to break at any moment. As her heart raced with anticipation, she prepared for more questions that would dig deeper into her proposal's feasibility, recalling a lesson learned from her patients. Courage is rooted in vulnerability and resilience. The confrontation with Dr. Hayes was just the beginning. How far was she willing to go to defend her vision? The meeting was no longer just an opportunity for dialogue, it had transformed into a battlefield for her ideas and determination. Emily took another breath, knowing she had to maintain her ground as the true test of her leadership loomed ahead. Would she rise to the occasion or crumble under scrutiny? The answer awaited her, simmering just beneath the surface. Emily stood at the precipice of uncertainty, her pulse pounding in her ears. The room buzzed with unspoken judgments, and she could feel the weight of Dr. Hayes's gaze. He was not just a visor, he was a gatekeeper, controlling the flow of acceptance or dismissal. The air felt thick, and her solidarity was wavering, but an ember ignited within her a fierce determination to embody the very change she was proposing. I want to highlight a recent case that exemplifies the issues we're facing, she said, adjusting her posture. She needed to connect her theoretical proposal with a tangible experience. In our last quarterly review, I encountered a patient, Mrs. Jenkins, whose care plan was stuck within layers of red tape. A simple medication adjustment that could have alleviated her pain was delayed for weeks. That is not just inefficiency, that is a failing on our part to prioritize our patients. She watched as the faces around her reflected a mixture of concern and contemplation. Imagine, she continued, her voice steadying, if we could create a dialogue that allows for swift adjustments to such plans, a system that prioritizes the patient's experience over institutional barriers. We could reduce suffering and significantly enhance patient trust in us. Isn't that our ultimate goal? Dr. Hayes shifted, his expression contemplative. There was a hint of recognition in his eyes, and she seized that moment, propelled by her newfound confidence. Now, I know some may think we require more data to justify these changes, but evidence is not just found in spreadsheets. It is also in the experiences we nurture daily. Her voice softened, almost vulnerable, as she added, your hesitance may stem from a fear of the unknown. I share that fear, but what drives me forward is the knowledge that lives are directly affected by our inaction. If we don't evolve, we may become obsolete in delivering meaningful care. The room stilled. She could sense the gradual shift as colleagues exchanged glances. Perhaps they were grappling with their misgivings, or perhaps they were starting to see the merit in her perspective. But Dr. Hayes wasn't ready to yield. Emily, we must approach change quantitatively. Without a solid analysis, we risk misinvestment of time and resources. The board demands adherence to financial models, not idealistic aspirations. His response hit her with precision, but she refused to retreat. Facing this formidable opposition was integral to her development. I wholeheartedly believe there is a path forward that marries both strategic planning and innovative aspirations, one that actually enhances our financial models rather than detracts from them, she countered, her voice strengthening with each syllable. Empowering our team to act will yield improved patient outcomes, which translate to quicker recoveries and reduced costs.
Isn't that the data we ought to be focusing on?
As she spoke, a flash of inspiration ignited her mind. She scrutinized the possibility of staging a pilot program. It could be a small-scale initiative testing her framework in one department, allowing them to gather real-time data to support her vision. Calm enveloped her momentarily as her ideas crystallized. Yet, profound apprehension crystallized in the back of her mind. What if that pilot faltered? Doubt flickered like an unstable flame, threatening to snuff out her emerging light. Remembering Mrs. Jenkins and the tens of others yearning for change served as her anchor. I'm asking for an opportunity to inspire transformation and initiate a pilot program. It may be the first step to something greater. Allow us to gather the data organically through our improvement by simply acting. The silence was palpable, each heartbeat stretching the moment further. Emily could sense an echo of her resolve resonating through the room. Dr. Hayes leaned back, his brow furrowing deeper. You want to initiate this next quarter? Yes, Emily replied, the words solid like iron. Let us experiment with freedom to take initiative, and you will see results. The meeting shifted. It was no longer just Emily against the board. It evolved into a deliberation vital for patient care, a collective wrestle with the question of whether to embrace change alongside her. As each colleague weighed in, the balance of power ebbed and flowed. Disagreement, interest, and tentative support intermingled, showcasing a brewing tension between championing the new and clinging to the familiar. This rapidly evolving chorus of voices echoed within her, moving her forward, but a seed of doubt lingered. She felt she was on the verge of a breakthrough, yet also teetering at the edge of potential failure. Would they accept her vision entirely, or would her audacity crumble like brittle glass? The prospect of future discussions loomed ever closer, mixing eagerness and dread in a swirling dichotomy. As the meeting gradually drew to a close, a thought punctured the facade of calm she had managed to uphold. What if she stumbled down the path she was paving, burying not just her ambitions but the hopes of her patients beneath failure? Emily's inner determination flickered. It demanded that she march forward, but what awaited her on this unknown journey remained cloaked in shadows, haunting her anticipation. What new challenges would she face in attempting to sow the seeds of transformation? The moment of truth loomed just ahead. The morning sun poured through the window of Emily's office, illuminating the scattered papers that had become her lifeline and her burden. She sat at her desk, heart racing with both excitement and trepidation. The meeting from the previous day had been a pivotal moment, and though the storm within her had calmed slightly, uncertainty still churned in her mind. Would the pilot program garner the support it needed? How could she ensure success while grappling with the potential for failure? Drawing a deep breath, Emily opened her laptop. The blank screen staring back at her felt like an empty canvas waiting for her brush. She realized it was time to create a detailed proposal outlining the pilot, conceptualizing it not just as a singular experiment but as a model of communication, flexibility, and patient-centric care that would ripple through their entire practice. With each click of the keyboard, her focus sharpened. As she typed, the words began to dance onto the page with newfound clarity. She began with the objectives: streamline communication, prompt patient care adjustments, and a feedback loop that would allow for continuous improvement. But as she fleshed out the details, she couldn't help but feel an inner voice whispering doubt. What if her colleagues resisted the change? What if Dr. Hayes's assertion of needing solid data proved to be a barrier too large to overcome? She paused, sliding her chair back as those thoughts brewed anxiety in her gut. Taking a moment to breathe, she practiced reframing her perspective. This project was hers, a product of her hard work and commitment to meaningful patient care. Each doubt became a challenge she had to confront and conquer. What did she have to lose by putting her heart into this endeavor? Harnessing that energy, she decided to engage a few colleagues in informal discussions about their thoughts on the pilot. She hoped to tap into their insights while also cultivating a shared sense of ownership over the proposed changes. They were her allies, not adversaries. Touching base with them could help in transforming skepticism into support. The first conversation was with Martin, a seasoned nurse known for his empathy towards patients. As they chatted in the bustling break room, she felt a mixture of nervousness and exhilaration. "Emily," he began, concern furrowing his brow, "I appreciate your passion, but a pilot program is a big gamble.
How can we be sure it won't disrupt our workflow?
Emily leaned forward, her conviction palpable. We'll start small, allowing for adjustments without overwhelming everyone.
How can we respect workflow while also prioritizing patients? Let us adapt processes gradually and refine based on real feedback.
But we have to trust the team to act on this.
Martin nodded, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. I get that. Perhaps we can set up a system to collect feedback each week?
That way we know exactly where we stand. Excited by his suggestion, Emily felt a surge of confidence. Not only could this enhance collaboration, but it also reinforced a culture of empowerment among the team. She made a mental note that adaptability would become the backbone of her pilot initiative.
The second discussion was with Lydia, a junior physician enthusiastic about innovation.
As they stood in the hallway, Lydia's eyes sparkled as Emily articulated her vision for patient-centered care.
This could set a precedent, Emily.
I mean, we'd be modeling a way forward for the whole organization, Lydia said, her voice full of hope. I can rally others to get on board if you need help. With each conversation, encouragement replaced doubt, affirming her intent to lead the charge.
However, she knew conversations alone wouldn't suffice. She needed to be ready for the tough moments ahead, the inevitable pushback that would come from those tied to the status quo. As the day drew to a close, Emily reflected on how she had moved from trepidation to making strides toward change. She marveled at the progress she was making, slowly transforming fear into proactive steps forward. But there was a catch. Without support from Dr. Hayes and some board members, much of her progress could be compromised. The battle was far from over. Gritting her teeth, she prepared herself mentally to confront the very man who had been a staunch opponent of her ideas. She could no longer afford to back away from his scrutiny. The meeting with him loomed larger than ever, with both her vision and her self-worth hanging in the balance. The time had come to face Dr. Hayes, but would she have the courage to stand her ground when the stakes were at their highest? Would Emily's conviction be enough to sway him, or would this trial flame out before it ever ignited? Emily stood in front of the large glass window of her office, gazing out at the bustling activity outside. The world seemed oblivious to her internal storm. She felt the weight of anticipation settle heavy on her shoulders. The meeting with Dr. Hayes was imminent, and the suffocating tension in her chest flared as she imagined the dismissal that might await her. She couldn't let fear govern her actions. This was her moment. With a determined sigh, she returned to her desk. The proposal she had hammered out was more than just ink on paper, it was a reflection of her vision, her passion, and her commitment. As she straightened the stack of papers, she recalled Martin's insightful suggestion: adapting a system for feedback would be the very lifeblood of her plan. This was about collaboration, and she needed to embrace that philosophy fully. Engaging with her thoughts, she first revisited her motivations. How had she come this far? It dawned on her, she couldn't let the fear of failure overshadow her dedication to patient care. This clarity began to dissolve her anxiety, and she realized it was about more than just pushing her agenda. It was about empowering her colleagues, enriching their practice, and ultimately, benefiting their patients. As the clock ticked closer to her appointment, she reviewed the proposal once more, envisioning every detail. She reminded herself that the path of progress often lay through confrontation, and if she wanted this pilot program to thrive, she had to spark meaningful dialogue, even if it meant facing conflict head-on. Her heart raced at the thought of facing Dr. Hayes. He had a reputation for dismissing ideas that strayed too far from traditional protocols. But he also had a fierce commitment to the health and satisfaction of patients. Perhaps she could tap into that aspect, aligning her mission with his goals. It could be a point of connection rather than opposition. Arriving at the meeting room, Emily encountered a moment of stillness. She took a deep breath, reminding herself of how far she had come. A concise vision flashed in her mind: what if she could model articulate feedback and adaptability in real time with Dr. Hayes sitting across from her? Would he be open to change if he saw it as inevitable rather than disruptive? Stepping inside, her pulse quickened, and the sharp smell of polished wood filled her senses. Dr. Hayes was already there, flipping through a report. He looked up, his expression neutral but guarded. A knot of apprehension formed in her stomach, but she refused to let it overwhelm her.
This was her chance. "Dr. Hayes," she began, steadier than she felt, "thank you for meeting with me today. I want to discuss the pilot program proposal and how it can ultimately enhance our patient care." His eyes narrowed slightly, revealing his skepticism. "Emily, we both know change comes with risk. What proof do you have that this won't disrupt our already strained processes?" Perhaps it was the challenge in his voice or the lingering fear that she might be dismissed, but Emily shifted gears mentally. "What if we don't view it as a disruptive change? Instead, consider it as an organic evolution of our practice, an opportunity for the entire team to engage in a feedback system that promotes lifelong learning." As she navigated through the intricacies of her proposal, she noticed her confidence blooming as steady rhythm began to pulse within her. She was no longer a passive participant, she was an advocate. Their conversation became more dynamic, each point raised eliciting questions from Dr. Hayes, forcing her to think rapidly on her feet. Yet she had noticed a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. It was a promising sign. Was she swaying him? She pressed on, emphasizing data collection and gradual implementation strategies that would alleviate disruption. As the discussion unfolded, Emily felt a shift. The fear that had plagued her earlier was replaced with a fierce determination to articulate her vision. Yet, as she approached the conclusion, she sensed unease lingering in his gaze, despite his probing interest. Dr. Hayes leaned back, contemplating. "I see potential here, but I need assurance. I can't lay my credibility on the line without solid evidence." Her heart raced. There it was, the wall she had dreaded confronting. Yet this was not merely an obstacle, it was an invitation for dialogue. Emily recognized that she needed to rally support from her colleagues before advocating further. "You're absolutely right. With your support, I will take these ideas back to the team, gather more input, and come back with a stronger case," she replied, her voice unwavering. The meeting had not closed the deal, but it had reached a pivotal point, igniting a small flame of possibility. Emily had learned the value of meeting doubt with openness. As she walked out, the gravity of her interactions settled in, revealing that the real battle for her vision was just beginning, not only with Dr. Hayes, but internally, as she illuminated her own strengths. Determined, she made a mental note to regroup with Martin and Lydia. They could help carry this initiative forward, but there was still one more layer to peel back. A crucial meeting with the board awaited her. Would she be able to articulate the momentum she had begun to build, and more importantly, would it be enough to sustain the transformation she envisioned? The following morning, Emily woke up energized yet acutely aware that the true test of her resolve lay ahead. The board meeting loomed like a thundercloud, promising a storm of questions and scrutiny. She could feel the anticipation thrumming in her veins as she prepared for her presentation, the tangible sense of purpose igniting a fire within her. At breakfast, she rehearsed her talking points, determined to connect her vision of the pilot program with the overarching goals for improved patient care and operational efficiency. The feedback system she devised was not merely an idea, it represented a profound shift, a movement toward inclusivity within their departments. Arriving at St. Peter's Hospital, she greeted the familiar chaos of the entrance, where busy professionals rushed past her, unaware of the momentous encounter that awaited her. Emily's chest tightened with excitement and anxiety as she entered the pristine boardroom, where power dynamics pulsed beneath the surface. Seated at the long, polished table were the board members, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Dr. Hayes sat among them, and for a moment, their eyes locked, and understanding flowed between them, a recognition of the journey they had undertaken together. "Good morning," Emily began, her voice steady. "Today, I want to present a vision for enhancing patient care through a pilot program designed to foster open communication and swift responses to patient needs." Glancing at her neatly arranged documents, she summoned her courage and continued. "Our current system, while safe, creates barriers that impede optimal care. I propose that we initiate a pilot allowing nurses and physicians to adjust patient care plans in real time, supported by a feedback loop where everyone's voice matters." As she articulated her thoughts, her confidence swelled with every supportive nod and murmur among the board members. She cited the experiences of patients like Mrs. Jenkins, driving home the urgency of her mission, framing the proposed changes not as contentious disruptions but as essential evolutions. However, on the other side of the table, a familiar voice emerged.
Emily, while your passion is commendable, what evidence do we have to support such a radical shift?
Dr. Hayes' tone was firm but not unkind. It was a challenge and an opportunity. Swallowing hard, Emily drew on the strength she had cultivated throughout her journey.
Dr. Hayes, I understand your concerns. Change can be daunting, yet isn't the true risk stagnation?
I envision this pilot program as a calculated step forward, where we will monitor outcomes, adapt as necessary, and collect data that highlights both our achievements and areas for improvement. A ripple of conversation flickered through the room. At that moment, a board member smiled, expressing faith in Emily's vision.
Perhaps what we need is a way to balance innovation with our established protocols. Can we not learn from the pilot while guarding our core mission?
Feeling the winds shift ever so slightly in her favor, Emily seized the moment.
Absolutely.
This program can be structured to marry our commitment to patient safety with our desire to adapt and improve continuously. I propose building the pilot in phases, each reviewing progress and adjusting based on data-driven insights. As she summarized her goals, Emily observed the board's expressions softening, intrigued rather than skeptical. A powerful realization washed over her. She had transcended from being the silent observer to an empowered advocate for change. The journey had transformed her from the quiet one into a formidable communicator, able to articulate the needs of her colleagues and patients alike. The dialogue between board members grew increasingly engaged. They began discussing the potential for synergies among clinical teams, the importance of collective input, and how this pilot could serve as a model for other hospitals. Finally, Dr. Hayes spoke again, this time with a note of sincerity.
Emily, I believe there is potential here. If we are to proceed, I trust you will lead this initiative with the same dedication you've shown today.
In that profound moment, Emily felt an anchor of validation anchoring her spirit. She wasn't just advocating for a change, she was spearheading a movement towards a more collaborative future in patient care. She had achieved something she had once deemed impossible. The stakes had felt unfathomable, but now, she stood at the forefront of transformation, poised to enact a legacy of care that mirrored her ambition.
As she left the boardroom, a wave of exhilaration washed over her. Each step felt lighter, buoyed by the collective energy that was beginning to pulse through the hospital, a beacon of hope for staff and patients alike.
They were no longer just employees, they were part of a shared mission aimed at healing.
Emily knew there would be challenges ahead. Yet, she felt equipped to navigate whatever came next.
The real achievement wasn't just in the pilot program itself but in her personal transformation. The quiet nurse was now a resolute leader, unafraid to lend her voice for the greater good. This was merely the beginning. Embracing her newfound purpose, she prepared to rally her colleagues, to ignite their passions, to build a coalition that emphasized not just results but the meaningful connections that composed their care. Together, they would embrace the change they needed to see unfold.
You need to subscribe now to witness the culmination of Emily's journey and the transformations ahead. Leave a like now to amplify these stories and support the message of personal growth and perseverance.
Comment your reflections on this incredible conclusion and what you believe will come next for Emily's mission. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to hear her story of empowerment and change. Don't wait even one more second. True fans of overcoming stories know the impact your support can have.